Did Terrence Crawford show himself to be a pound for pound number one as the media and everybody say that he is? CombatTalkRadio.net. My name is Leicester. I'm your host, and it's been a long time since I did a video, but I felt it was important on this one. I'm going to surprise some people that have listened for a while. I've been hypercritical of Terrence Crawford simply because I felt like the level of competition at a point was just questionable, and he was sitting on the laurels when he should have been stepping up years ago. And then when he did step up, it was asterisk after asterisk after asterisk, and it seemed like it just never stopped. Well, you know, he had the fight with Sean Porter. Sean Porter, we would learn later, had two bad hips. Kenny Porter stopped the fight because Kenny Porter was triggered. So that's an asterisk win. It's a win, but it's an asterisk win. Sean Porter arguably won 5 of the first 6 rounds with a very cautious style. The reason I'm bringing that fight up will come clear here in a moment. He fights David Avanesian because he ducks, the fight with Spence, at least initially. Fights David Avanesian. They're sketchy gloves. It's a bare knuckle knockout. I don't know what even happened with the appeal. Eventually fights Errol Spence. Errol Spence, Floyd Mayweather once said that Errol Spence should be fighting at 168. He felt that Spence is just big. He should be fighting full, and he should not be draining himself down to 147. Spence himself said he was having trouble making weight. Okay. Fight Spence, dominates Spence. It's clear the physical presence of Spence is not there. Getting rocked off jabs. He simply wasn't there. He looked skeletal. That was not physically the 100% Spence. Spence then would later go into hiatus for a bit. Apparently he's going to be coming back to fight Sebastian Fundora in October for Fundora's WBC title. This means that, and I'm tying it all together, so follow me here. Fundora holds the WBC and WBO. He got the WBO, I believe it was, from Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu was gifted the title, aka email champion, so at 154. So then, because of Charlo fighting Canelo. So then now, and they can see how it all ties together. It'll tie together. So Tim Tszyu gets completely beat down. He gets a cut and then gets beat down. I argue Tim Tszyu will never be the same again. That's my stance. Sebastian Fundora wins the WBO, WBC titles. Spence is going for the WBC title because he's the mandatory at WBC for 154. Fundora was supposed to fight, I believe it was Fundora supposed to fight in a rematch with Tim Tszyu. That's not going to happen because Tim Tszyu, I say he's done. The WBO then said, Fundora, if you don't fight Crawford next to unify the titles, conditional on him winning this night I'm talking about here against Madrimov, then we're going to strip you. I said at the time, I felt like, Fundora's not going to care because it seemed like they had pretty much agreed both in their minds that Fundora was going to go after Spence. Spence is coming off a loss, number one. Spence, it's not his first time at 154. I'll get back to that. But he's coming off a loss. He looks damaged. He doesn't look anywhere close to what he was. And Fundora may want to rebuild. And Fundora's on a rise. He's on a run. Crawford now fights Madrimov this night. That's where we're coming full circle because the open question was, well, why isn't Crawford doing the rematch with Spence, or why isn't he going straight after Fundora? And the chatter was that Crawford wanted to go after Canelo because the Saudis, they wanted to try to book the fight with Crawford-Canelo because the media sold everybody that it's okay, pound for pound this, pound for pound that, and it's worth doing. And then somebody said on the news that, well, Canelo's open to it. And they would look at how he performs against Madrimov. And then people were saying that Madrimov was essentially going to be a 50-50 fight. I looked at the fight. I looked at his style. He had, from my visual, he has a tremendous amateur pedigree. And I saw that he looked flashy, and he did look impressive against flat-footed fighters. But the one fight where he had to draw or whatever, and I forget which one that was, but he got bamboozled. And I figured that Crawford, if nothing else, would have him stumbling all over himself, and he was not going to be using these awkward angles, and he's not going to be going after Crawford the way he did because he'd get dropped like crazy. In this fight, and I watched it, in this fight, Crawford, for whatever reason, fought this dude the same way he fought Paul Stahl, just with more punches. I don't understand unless if he was hesitant about the power. If it was the power that was throwing him, it didn't seem like the power was directly bothering him anyway. And I think Madrimov, perhaps the amateur credentials just were so good that he was able to nullify Crawford without overcoming him. I don't agree that it was a straight down the line like the judges had it at all. From what I saw, it felt like it better served with a little bit more to Crawford, just because Madrimov landed at times, don't get it twisted. Crawford swept the last 2 rounds-ish, and perhaps they were giving the champion the benefit of the doubt. I just didn't see this straight up 7-5. I would figure an 8-4 performance for Crawford is what I saw, simply by virtue of Madrimov wasn't doing what he normally would do, and if this was Manny Pacquiao, they'd have punished him for not fighting the way you normally fight. Crawford has fought that way before, so there's already precedent to see him tentative that way, cautious, basically playing the counterpuncher's role. And so I wonder if Crawford just saw, because Madrimov, the thing with him is he can switch hit too, so maybe, and he was doing, so maybe Crawford said, okay, well, I don't exactly know which stance to hit on this dude. And with Madrimov doing this style that he did, which I think was a good game plan, I'm not criticizing it, perhaps he had watched Shawn Porter, in my mind, win the first 5 rounds of their fight, and he saw how Porter was cautious. He would not fully engage, but he had to be smarter than Porter eventually was. Eventually, Porter left himself open to the mistake that would get him dropped the first time. Madrimov never made that mistake. It seemed like he was just calculated all the way through, like Shawn Porter should have been doing, until he lost focus. If you watch watch the first 5 rounds of this fight and the first 5 rounds of Shawn Porter against Crawford, and you'll see what I'm saying. Like, it seemed like Madrimov directly studied the Shawn Porter fight, which I think was great. He may have studied a little Kavaliauskas, but I didn't get a sense. It seemed like Shawn Porter's performance stood out in my mind, and I think he did a good job and a good showing of himself. And we have to kind of level set here. This chatter about Canelo needs to calm down, because Crawford didn't look like anything amazing. Crawford could never back the man up at 154. Crawford could never cause any significant damage to the dude. I'm not talking facial damage. I'm talking where the guy respects the power. Madrimov never respected the power. The last 2 rounds were good because Crawford said, okay, we got to step it up or we're going to lose this, because Bomac was screaming at him in the corner again, just like he was doing against Shawn Porter. That's what happened. Well, if he's not able to move almost cussed, a 154 pounder in Madrimov, as talented as he is, if he's not able to move a 154 pounder, there was damn sure no way he's going to move a 168 pounder in Canelo. So this mythical matchup stuff hopefully calms down. I know it won't, but I hope it calms down to get people to understand weight classes matter. And I want to see how Spence performs against Fundora, because I said Fundora, the male Fundora, Sebastian Fundora, is not as good as his sister. His sister is an amazing fighter. He's not that good. He's just tall, lanky, awkward. And he hasn't fixed his eyes to my knowledge, and his eyesight is his crutch. And I think the reason that he accepted the fight against Errol Spence is that Errol Spence likes to come inside. Sebastian Fundora not being able to see at range means he wants you to come inside, which means it normally favors Fundora. But we got to see how Spence performs at 154. Again, Spence fought at 154 before. He debuted at 154. I think he fought 2 or 3 fights at 154, and then he went down to 147. Spence, unlike Crawford, has experience at 154, and Spence has always been a naturally larger guy. He's always been kind of a weight bully at 147. However, we don't know what damage has been done over time to Spence such that his performance, he should dominate Sebastian Fundora is my point. Despite the fact that Fundora favors guys coming inside, Fundora's never had amazing power. Spence has power when he uses it. Spence has a devastating body attack, and Fundora's wide open for body assault. So, in my mind, Errol Spence should dominate Sebastian Fundora at 154. If Errol Spence can show he's still there, he just was draining himself at 147, he's dominant at 154, to get that title off of Sebastian Fundora, the whole game changes. Crawford has to stop running from that rematch against Errol Spence, because it'll show you just fought this guy Madrimov, who is fresh, he's at his natural weight, he's not drained, he's not damaged, he's not nothing, and he took you to your absolute limits in this fight. You got Errol Spence, who's now allegedly no longer draining himself, goes up against Sebastian Fundora, who is champion, who's fresh off taking out Tim Tszyu and taking his O. And if Spence does what I think he should do, which is dominate Fundora to get that title, now the game changes. It means, okay, with a non-drained Spence, and now we're at this weight, 154, Crawford said that you were ready to go up. We saw what happened. Spence said, it's time for me to go up. I can't make 147 anymore. We may see what's happened there. Now we got to have that rematch. We got to run it back and understand whether weight draining was a factor in why Spence got toasted, based on the fact that Madrimov was able to perform the way he did. Because there's no reason Crawford should not have easily stopped that man. I'm not even talking about pedigree. I'm talking just styles. Bomac even said himself after the fight, Crawford should have gone after him. You got to go to him. That's what he did against Spence. He went straight after him. He didn't back off. He went straight after him. In Madrimov, he didn't go after him. Well, why? What was different? And it's the weight. To me, we need to see how Spence performs against Sebastian Fundora. That's going to tell us whether or not it was possible Spence Crawford 1 was about a weight-drained Spence who got dominated because he was draining himself down for so damn long, and Crawford was opportune and got in there at the right moment. And let's run it back at 154 and let's see really what the true story is. I think it's a great potential matchup. Now that we have this whole blend of what's going on and one of the Charlos is out of the way, we can let Canelo go off, do his thing. He's going to be fighting Bumbanga, which is a terrible fight. But the point is, I just wanted to unravel the spider web of how we got here. We got here because we don't know what version of Spence showed up that night. He took an L, and now he has to redeem himself. And now he'll be at 154. And if he performs stellar, it'll tell us that he probably was drained when he fought against Crawford. And that was probably the reason that Crawford beat him. And at 154, he should perform significantly better. So now it'll be a more even matchup. And that's what I want to see. Let's watch what Spence does next. Let's watch what Crawford does next. There's other 154s for Crawford, but it's a limited scope, right? Danny Swift is still out there. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight because Crawford ducked Danny Swift years ago, so I wouldn't mind seeing that one for sure. Jermell Charlo's still active. He's still a fighter, so perhaps he goes there as a get-back fight. I wouldn't mind seeing it because they had a little bit of beef happening. Tim Zeus Toast, I don't want to see him ever again. There's a number of guys out there in 154 land. 154 is one of those hot divisions now where 147's kind of died off. Boots is now number one there. We got to see over time what happens with the division. Meanwhile, again, I saw basically an 8-4 performance from Terrence Crawford against Madrimov. I think he did well. Again, the weight seemed to be a bit of a shift for him, and the person across from him wasn't falling for the traps and seemed to be not his equal in skill, but his equal in ring IQ. And that was a rare thing to see, and I think he did a great job, did at Madrimov, and he deserves bigger fights in the future. Let's see where he goes, too. It's just like Karan Chikasian. Karan Chikasian has been stellar outside of the Boots fight, which is why I said, okay, maybe run that back, because some of these guys are just really good at just styles make the fights, and that's what we probably saw here.